Hello. In this video I'm going to take a look at a type of question that I've had a few requests about, and that's adding more than two fractions together. Adding three fractions can be a bit of a long process, but it's actually the same exact steps as adding two fractions. Some of the difficulty usually comes in with the larger numbers that are at play. This, for those of you who aren't sure, is still in section 2.7. So let's take a look at this particular example. We have 2/3 plus 3/5 plus 7/19, and that 7/19 is the one that's going to give us a lot of trouble. The denominator of 19 is pretty big. So just as with adding two fractions, the first step is to find a common denominator. A common denominator is going to be a multiple of all of your denominators. In this case, it has to be a multiple of 3, 5, and 19. There's a couple of ways that you can go about doing this. The multiplication table that's in DocSharing goes up to 20, which is great for 19 and for 3 and 5. Unfortunately, the problem with this is it is not going to be large enough still to find the common denominator for all three of these. It has to be a number that all three of these numbers divide into, and there is a number, it's just not going to be on that particular multiplication table. There are other ways, though. There's the prime factorization method that the textbook uses, which is usually a little bit too much, to be honest. And then, if in doubt, if it's taking you more than a minute to find the common denominator, just go ahead and multiply your denominators together. I know it's going to be pretty big multiplying these three numbers together, but in this case, that'll actually get you the least common denominator. Even though the number is pretty big, there's not much else you can get. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and multiply out 3 times 5 times 19. So you can go ahead and punch that into your calculator, and it'll tell you that the common denominator that you would get is 285. That's pretty big, but we can work with it. So the next step, after I've found my common denominator, I'm going to have to write out equivalent fractions. I do that by starting out by writing my common denominator next to each denominator. That's the 285, which is pretty huge, but we'll work with it. And I'm going to put that under the fraction bar. I'm leaving the numerator blank, though. I don't know what that numerator is, and I cannot just carry the 2 over. So 285, whew, big numbers. But again, don't panic. You can use a calculator to do some of the messier computations. I know some of you guys feel like you shouldn't have to use the calculator, you should be able to do some of these things longhand, and you know, that's true for some things, but there's no shame in doing, say, 285 divided by 19 using the machine. That's the type of computation that calculators are really good at, and there's no sense going through and doing the long division if you don't have to. So how do we find these equivalent fractions now that we've got our common denominator? You're going to divide the common denominator by each of the fractions denominators and then multiply the result by the numerator. So let's do it for all three of these here. For that first fraction, we've got 285, and we're going to divide by 3. And we divide backwards here. In other words, you're looking for a number that you'd have to multiply 3 by to get 285. So you divide 285 by 3, and you'll get 95. And that means I'm going to multiply upstairs that 2 by 95. Again, you can punch that directly into your calculator if you want to, though that one's actually not too hard. And you should get 190. And that's your new numerator. Okay, let's do the second one. 285. I'm going to divide it by 5. So 285 divided by 5 is giving me 57, and that means I'm going to multiply the 3 by 57. I get another huge number here, 171. Could be worse. Alright, and if you are feeling bold, go ahead and pause the video and try to do that last one out. It's just the same as the top two, so it shouldn't be any different from those previous two, but go ahead and pause here and try that last one out, see if you're converting these properly. Alright, did you do it? Well, when I divided 285 by 19, I got 15. So I'm going to have to do 7 times 15 here. And 7 times 15 works out to 105. And that's what I'm getting here. Alright, so hopefully you got the same thing, but if not, hopefully you also see what the process should be. Let's move on to our final step. the last step is depending on if it's an addition or subtraction problem, and I'm pretty sure all the ones they give you are addition, but you do have to check the signs. If the signs are different for any of the numbers, you'll end up subtracting them. But you're going to add or subtract the numerators and then keep that common denominator. So the denominator of my answer is going to be 285. No question there. And because everything is positive here, I can just go ahead and add 190, 171, and 105. And when you do that addition, it comes out to 466. Now again, if you want to pause and try to work out any of these computations on your own, you're more than welcome to pause this video. Alright, so there is a final step which I didn't actually write out here, but the final step is to make absolutely sure that this is in lowest terms. Well, this is actually not too bad here, believe it or not, because one of the aspects of reducing a very large numbered fraction to lowest terms is to try to find out what are the numbers that you can divide either the numerator or denominator by. Well, 285, I already know that is 3 times 5 times 19. That's where I got it from. I got it by multiplying together those three denominators. So that's 3 times 5 times 19, and that means the only possible numbers that I can divide 285 by are 3, 5, and 19, because all three of those are prime. And what that means is I can't break down 3, 5, or 19 any further. 3 can only be divided by 3 and 1, 5 can only be 5 and 1, and 19, nothing goes into 19 other than 19 and 1. So they can't break down any further, which means those are the only numbers that I can divide 285 by. Those and multiples of them. But if I can't divide 466 by any of those three numbers, then I'm done, because there's no way I'd be able to divide it by 3 times 5, 15, if I can't divide it by 3 or 5 individually. Well, it's good to go ahead and check. The 3 and the 5 are a real quick check because, hey, it ends in a 6, so it ends in an even number, making it even, which means I can never divide it by an odd number. If it were a multiple of 5, if I could divide 466 by 5, it would have to end in a 5 or 0, which it doesn't, so I can't divide it by 5. The only thing that you'd have to check is 19. So go ahead and do 466 divided by 19 in your calculator. Again, that's something that I would use a calculator for. Don't bother with doing the long division on that. And you'll see that you get an ugly decimal, which means I cannot reduce it. I can't divide the top and bottom by any of the same factors other than 1. So that means I'm done, and that's my final answer. Alright, so to summarize here, the steps for adding and subtracting 3 or more fractions are exactly the same as the steps that you would have for just adding or subtracting 2 fractions. The difficulty often comes from dealing with those large numbers. Let the calculator do the work for you, and just make sure that you're showing your work meticulously. That way you'll avoid mistakes. Last but not least, reducing to lowest terms can be a bit tricky, but if you pick one of the two numbers to break down as much as possible, and then check the other number, either the numerator or denominator, to see if it has any of those common factors, you should be able to reduce.